He told me not to joke about cheating again, so I did it on his birthday. The cake, a decadent chocolate fudge monstrosity, was the only thing that stayed. Looking back, I should have known better, but honestly, even now, a small, stubborn part of me still doesn't get why he couldn't take a joke. I'm Alara, 28, and this all started 3 years into my marriage with Leland, when I discovered that the placid waters of our life were infinitely more interesting with a few well-aimed stones. It began innocently enough, as these things always do. We were at a sterile corporate dinner, seated at a round table with his colleagues. Leland, my ever-dependable, ever-predictable husband, was explaining why a project deadline had been pushed. He mentioned working late with his team, and the words hung in the air, practically begging for me to play with them. I saw the opening, a perfect little gap in the banal conversation that needed to be filled with a bit of spice. I couldn't resist. I leaned in, letting a conspiratorial smirk play on my lips. Yeah, sure. Working late with Catherine from marketing. I hear she's very dedicated. The table didn't just go quiet, it felt like someone had sucked the air out of the room. The polite chatter about interest rates and building codes died instantly. I watched, fascinated, as a dark flush crept up Leland's neck, a telltale sign of his discomfort, coloring his handsome face that perfect shade of mortification that I found oddly satisfying. It was a flicker of intense, raw emotion in our otherwise beige existence. His boss, a portly man named Mr. Henderson, coughed out an awkward chuckle that sounded more like a startled seal, breaking the spell. The conversation stuttered back to life, but I had found my new favorite pastime, making Leland just jealous enough to keep him on his toes. You see, Leland had built his entire identity around being the good guy, Mr. Reliable, the steadfast architect everyone at the firm depended on. He was a pillar of stability, and while that was comforting at first, it had become suffocating. Our life was a perfectly landscaped garden, beautiful and orderly, and sometimes I felt the desperate need to trample the flower beds just to feel the soil under my feet. It was this predictability that drove me to it. Sometimes, while he showered, the steady hum of the water a soundtrack to my minor transgression, I'd scroll through his boring work texts. Endless threads about blueprints, zoning permits, and client feedback. Nothing was ever there, not a single misplaced emoji or a vaguely flirtatious sign-off. And a part of me, a part I'd never admit out loud, was almost disappointed. But God forbid he ever touched my phone. My phone was my world, a curated collection of inside jokes, flirtatious banter with friends, and a life that felt vibrant and separate from our shared one. One time, he picked it up from the nightstand, simply to check the time, his own phone being dead. The violation felt immediate and immense. "Why are you spying on me?" I snapped, snatching it back from his hand with a speed that surprised us both. The look on his face was priceless, a mixture of shock, hurt, and a bizarre hint of guilt, as if I'd caught him in the act of some grand betrayal when all he wanted was to know if it was past midnight. I held on to that image. It was proof that I still had the power to affect him. My friend Phoebe's husband, Ethan, was the rom-com type. He brought her flowers every Tuesday, just because. He'd planned surprise weekend trips. Leland thought anniversary flowers, purchased on the way home from work, were sufficient. I made sure he knew the difference. "Did you see Ethan surprised Phoebe with tickets to that concert she loves?" I'd ask casually, my face illuminated by the glow of my phone as we sat on the couch in the evening. "He's so thoughtful. He really listens to her." "Oh." Leland would let out a long, weary sigh, the one he reserved for conversations about money or my perceived dissatisfactions. "Alara, we're saving for the house deposit. We talked about this. We have a budget." But I knew what he was really saying, what lay beneath the practical excuses. He wasn't trying hard enough. He was getting complacent. So, the cheating jokes became my thing, my signature bit at gatherings. They were harmless, really, just a way to liven things up, to remind him that I was a woman other men desired, even if he seemed to forget it sometimes. The jokes escalated from private digs to public performances. At a summer barbecue, standing around the grill with a small group of our friends, I found another perfect opening. "Don't worry about Leland being late with the burgers," I'd announced to the group, my voice light and teasing. "He was probably just dropping off his other wife first. Her kids are much more demanding." Everyone laughed, a chorus of polite, if slightly strained, amusement. People don't know how to react to that kind of humor, which is half the fun. They glance at the husband, gauging his reaction before committing to a full laugh. I'd watch Leland, who would try to smile through it, the spatula in his hand gripping a little too tight, his jaw set. It was a game, a tense, thrilling game, and I was the only one who truly enjoyed the rules. When he finally confronted me, it was late on a Tuesday, in the quiet sanctuary of our kitchen. The day's dishes were done, and the house was still. He was still in his work clothes, a crease of exhaustion etched between his brows that I chose to ignore. His voice was low and serious, completely devoid of the humor I insisted was there. "Alara, we need to talk about the jokes. They make me uncomfortable. They're embarrassing and hurtful." I was leaning against the counter, scrolling through Instagram, half listening. I didn't even look up. "Oh my God, it's just a joke, Leland." I rolled my eyes, a gesture I knew infuriated him because it was a full-body dismissal. "Everyone else thinks it's funny. You're being way too sensitive." I finally turned my attention from the phone to him, my expression one of bored condescension. "Besides, if you weren't so boring sometimes, I wouldn't need to spice things up. Our life feels like a straight, flat road. I'm just adding a few curves." That hit a nerve. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened, the way the light in his tired eyes dimmed. "Why do you feel the need to put me down in front of people who respect me?" he asked quietly. The question was so earnest, so vulnerable, it almost made me feel a pang of guilt. Almost. "Put you down? I'm just having fun. You need to lighten up." I walked over and patted his cheek, a gesture that was meant to be affectionate but came across as condescending, and I knew it. Not everything is a personal attack on you, you know. He tried bringing it up again a week later, this time in a more public setting, which was a tactical error on his part. We were having dinner with his father, Richard, a stoic, quiet man who mirrored his son's infuriating dependability. During a lull in the conversation, I joked that Leland was so quiet because he was probably texting his girlfriend under the table. It wasn't even a good joke, but the reaction was instantaneous. "Alara, stop. We talked about this," Leland said, his voice firm, his eyes flashing with a rare fire. The public setting made his rebuke sharper, more humiliating for me. I immediately turned to his dad, playing the part of the wounded, misunderstood wife. "We're just having fun, right, Richard?" Leland's being so dramatic again. His dad, ever the diplomat, cleared his throat and shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Well, perhaps there's a time and a place for certain jokes, Alara." Great. A united front. Of course, he'd take his son's side. His mother, who I was sure disliked me, would have probably said the same if she ever bothered to show up when I was around. We'd had this weird tension ever since our wedding reception, when I'd made some constructive comments about her famously dry brisket. Now, she conveniently had migraines whenever we were invited over. Later that night, back in the perceived safety of our home, Leland actually raised his voice. "This isn't funny anymore, Alara. I have asked you repeatedly to stop with the cheating jokes. It's not just embarrassing me, it's humiliating me." I knew exactly what to do. I did what always worked. I went on the offensive and turned it around on him. "Why are you so insecure? What are you so afraid of? If you weren't hiding something, you wouldn't be so defensive all the time." His face fell, exactly as I expected. The anger drained away, replaced by a familiar look of defeat and confusion. He had no defense for that. I knew I'd won that round. After that, things started to change. It was subtle at first, a gradual cooling. Leland stopped sharing stories from work. He'd come home, ask about my day with a detached politeness, and then retreat into himself. The easy camaraderie we once shared, the late-night talks and shared laughter, evaporated, replaced by a polite, sterile distance. He was physically present, but emotionally, he was miles away. His smiles, when he offered them, were hollow shells that didn't reach his eyes, especially when I made one of my jokes. Oh, he started keeping his phone face down on the nightstand, a small but significant act of defiance. Then he began taking it with him into the bathroom, even for a quick shower. The secrecy was a palpable thing between us, a new, unwelcome guest in our home. It was infuriating. What could he possibly need to hide? Obviously, I checked it the second I got the chance, one afternoon when he was out mowing the lawn. And that's when I discovered he'd added a new passcode. The nerve. The hypocrisy. Changed your password? I asked the moment he came inside, sweat still glistening on his forehead. My tone was light, but there was an edge to it. Trying to keep secrets now? I thought you said going through each other's phones was spying. He shot back, not even looking at me as he went to the fridge for a bottle of water. Your words, not mine. God, he was so annoying when he used my own arguments against me. That's different. I have nothing to hide. Neither do I, Alara, he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. I just want some basic privacy. 2 weeks later, we were having dinner with Phoebe and Ethan. The tension between Leland and me was so thick you could cut it with a steak knife. I, of course, couldn't resist addressing it. I brought up Leland's newfound password protection. He's suddenly all secretive with his phone, I said, winking at Phoebe over my wine glass. Makes you wonder, right? Instead of laughing along, Phoebe, my best friend, looked uncomfortable. She glanced at Leland, a flicker of sympathy in her eyes, then back at me. Maybe he just wants some privacy, Alara. Everyone deserves that. The betrayal stung. Thank you, Leland said, looking at Phoebe with a raw gratitude that made my blood boil. Wow, taking his side now? I snapped at her, my voice sharper than I intended. I didn't realize you two were so close. The table went silent. I could see Ethan shifting uncomfortably, his gaze fixed on his plate. Leland just stared at his, a mask of weary resignation on his face. Right on cue, I changed the subject, but not before getting one last dig in. I brought up how Leland had missed my cousin's baby shower to work the previous weekend. Probably hanging out with Catherine from marketing, I added with a brittle, fake laugh. They've been working a lot of weekends lately. Oh. The moment we got in the car, Leland exploded. It wasn't loud, but it was potent. What is wrong with you? You promised to stop with the cheating jokes. Oh, please, I was just... No, Alara, you're doing exactly what you promised you wouldn't do. You're embarrassing me in front of the few friends we have left. The last part caught my attention. What do you mean left? He gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. Haven't you noticed? Mark and Alicia haven't invited us over in months. Not since you suggested I might be sleeping with Mark's sister at their anniversary party. They don't call anymore. That was just a joke, I protested, though a cold feeling was starting to creep into my stomach. If you say I'm being too sensitive one more time, I swear to God, Alara. He rarely interrupted me, and never with that tone. It was cold, sharp, and utterly final. This isn't about me being sensitive. This is about you constantly, systematically undermining our relationship for a cheap laugh. I stared out the window, arms crossed, watching the streetlights blur past. Whatever. You're overreacting, as usual. I could feel him seething next to me as he drove in a heavy, suffocating silence. I couldn't help myself. I had to have the last word, to reclaim my power. Besides, I added, my voice a low taunt, someone needs to keep you on your toes. Make sure you don't get too comfortable. When Leland's 32nd birthday started approaching, an unnerving silence surrounded the topic. Usually, he'd drop hints for weeks, a restaurant he wanted to try, a weekend trip to the coast. This time, nothing. Just a void. Fine. If he was going to be passive-aggressive, I would be proactive. I'd plan something myself, a grand gesture to show everyone, including him, what a thoughtful, fun-loving wife I really was. I went all out. I rented the private back room at his favorite steakhouse, the one with the dark wood and leather chairs. I ordered the decadent, multi-layered chocolate fudge cake he loves from that fancy bakery across town that costs a fortune. I invited all our remaining friends and a few of his more sociable coworkers. I even managed to convince his dad, Richard, to agree to come, which was a minor miracle considering how awkward things had been. His mom, predictably, had plans she couldn't change. A last-minute charity gala. Whatever. The whole time I was planning, drowning in invoices and RSVP lists, Leland seemed distracted, detached. He'd been taking these mysterious phone calls, stepping outside onto the porch to talk, his back turned to the window. It was new, and it was suspicious. One night, I heard him mention something about getting everything in order, before hanging up quickly when I walked into the room. When I asked who it was, he just said, "Work stuff," and immediately changed the subject. 2 days before the party, I was at the boutique where I worked part-time when Julian came in. Julian was a regular customer, a handsome landscape architect who always flirted with me in a way that was both flattering and harmless. He'd been texting me occasionally, nothing serious, just friendly banter with a hint of something more. Leland would have hated it if he knew, which is precisely why I kept my phone locked and never mentioned Julian. As I was ringing up his purchase, another expensive scarf for his sister, that I suspected was just an excuse to see me, a brilliant, audacious idea hit me. The ultimate way to lighten the mood, to snap Leland out of whatever funk he'd been in. A joke so big, so undeniable, that it would finally make him see how ridiculous his jealousy and sensitivity were. "Hey, Julian," I said casually, bagging the scarf. "What are you doing Saturday night? My husband's having a birthday party, and I think you should come." The surprise on his face was priceless. "Really? You want me to meet your husband?" He looked equal parts confused and thrilled. "Absolutely. It'll be fun." I leaned in closer across the counter, dropping my voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Just play along with whatever I say, okay? I'm planning a little joke to lighten the mood. My husband can be a bit serious. I think this will be good for him." Julian grinned, his eyes lighting up. He clearly thought this was heading somewhere exciting. "I'm in. Text me the details." That night, I lay in bed next to Leland. He was reading some boring architecture book, the light from his lamp creating a small, isolated pool of light on his side of the bed, leaving me in the shadows. In the cool blue glow of my own phone, I crafted my perfect plan. I'd set up a series of increasingly suggestive texts with Julian. I would leave my phone where Leland would accidentally see them during the party. Then, I'd have Julian show up, unannounced and looking handsome. Leland would get all jealous and worked up, maybe make a scene. And then surprise! I would reveal it was all a hilarious, elaborate birthday prank. Everyone would laugh. Leland would finally see how he overreacted about everything, how silly he'd been, and we could finally go back to normal. It was foolproof. It was brilliant. The day of the party, I was buzzing with a nervous, excited energy. Everything was set up perfectly at the restaurant. The decorations were tasteful, the cake was in the kitchen, and the private room felt intimate and celebratory. I'd even bought a new dress, a slinky slip of emerald green silk that I knew Leland used to love on me. He barely seemed to notice when I put it on, offering a distracted, "Looks nice," before turning back to his phone. His loss. As I finished my makeup, I sent a final text to Julian to confirm. His reply came immediately. "Can't wait to finally meet the famous Leland. This is going to be a night to remember." I smiled at my reflection, admiring the way the green brought out my eyes. It certainly was. The party started well enough. People arrived, drinks flowed, and the low hum of conversation filled the room. Leland was doing that thing he does, playing the gracious host, smiling and laughing in all the right places, even though I knew he was still mad about our fight earlier that week. His dad showed up with a gift-wrapped box, and that awkward, pained smile that said he'd rather be anywhere else. Phoebe and Ethan came late, and Phoebe gave me a brief, cool hug, barely making eye contact. Whatever, I'd deal with her weirdness later. Once everyone had their drinks, I clinked my glass with a fork, calling for attention. A speech, I said, laughing. "I want to thank everyone for coming to celebrate my amazing husband." I placed my hand on Leland's shoulder, squeezing a little too hard. 32 years of being the most dependable, predictable, steadfast man I know. A few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the room. Leland's jaw tightened, but he kept that plastic smile plastered on his face. "Seriously, though," I continued, leaning into the microphone I'd requested, "no one knows how to work late like my Leland." I winked directly at Catherine from his office, who immediately looked down at her drink. "Just kidding. Or am I?" More awkward laughter followed. As planned, during the ensuing chatter, I left my phone on the table when I went to check on the cake, making sure the screen was facing up, notifications visible. I took my time, chatting with the waitstaff, giving the bait plenty of time to be taken. When I returned a few minutes later, my heart thumping with anticipation, Leland was standing rigid by the table, my phone in his hand. "Your phone's been blowing up," he said quietly, holding it out to me. His expression was completely unreadable, a blank slate. "Oh, thanks, babe," I said with forced casualness. Julian had followed the script perfectly. The final text, glowing on the screen, read, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Your husband won't know what hit him." I watched Leland's face for the familiar jealous tension, for the anger to cloud his eyes, but instead he just looked tired, profoundly and utterly tired. Before I could gauge his reaction further, the restaurant host appeared at the entrance to our private room. "There's a gentleman here asking for Alara. Says he's expected." And there was Julian, right on cue, looking effortlessly hot in a way I knew would push all of Leland's buttons. "Happy birthday, man," Julian said, extending his hand to Leland with a confident smile. "Ilara's told me so much about you." The room went silent. Everyone was watching. This was it, the big moment. Leland looked at Julian's outstretched hand, then at my triumphant face, then back to Julian. "I bet she has," Leland said, his voice quiet but carrying through the silent room. Then, to my absolute heart-stopping shock, he shook Julian's hand. "Thanks for coming." Wait, what? Where was the jealous outburst, the confrontation, the drama? This wasn't following my script at all. "Babe, this is Julian." I jumped in, my voice a little too high as I tried to salvage the situation. "He's a friend from work." I emphasized the word friend just enough to raise suspicion. "I know who he is," Leland replied calmly, turning to me. His voice dropped so low only I could hear. "You've been texting him all week. Your passcode is still your birthday, Alara. You never changed it." My heart stopped. My blood ran cold. I forced a laugh, a sound that was too loud, too sharp, too brittle for the room. "Everyone, this is getting crazy. Julian is just a customer from the boutique who's been helping me plan Leland's surprise." "Surprise?" Julian looked utterly confused. "You told me—" "The cake!" I interrupted desperately, my mind racing. "Let's bring out the cake." As the staff wheeled in the elaborate cake, its candles blazing, I tried to regain control, to force the scene back into the happy birthday narrative. "Happy birthday to my amazing, wonderful husband," I announced, moving to stand next to Leland for the obligatory couple photo. He took a deliberate step away from me. "No, thank you." The room was so quiet you could hear the candles flickering, melting wax onto the chocolate frosting. "Don't be dramatic," I hissed at him under my breath. "It's your birthday party. Smile." "Is it?" He looked around the room, at the uncomfortable faces of our friends, then his eyes, cold and clear as ice, finally landed on mine. "Because it feels like another one of your opportunities to embarrass me, and I'm done." The night imploded spectacularly after that. Leland turned and walked out of the room without another word. His dad stood up, placed a hand on his son's shoulder as they left, and shot me a look of profound, silent disappointment that was worse than any angry words. Julian, realizing he'd been a pawn in something ugly, awkwardly backed toward the exit, muttering about a misunderstanding. One by one, our guests made their excuses, their averted eyes and hasty goodbyes a clear verdict. Soon only Phoebe and Ethan remained, sitting amidst the wreckage. "What the hell just happened?" I demanded, collapsing into a chair, the adrenaline leaving me shaky. "It was just a joke. Why is everyone acting like I committed a crime?" Phoebe sighed, a long, weary sound, and exchanged a look with Ethan that made my skin crawl. "Alara, you invited another man to your husband's birthday party and intentionally set it up to look like you were cheating on him. What did you think was going to happen? It was going to be funny once everyone realized it was a prank." I insisted, my voice cracking. "That's not a prank, Alara," Ethan interrupted, his voice firm in a way I'd never heard from him before. "He wouldn't even look at me. That's cruel." "Oh, come on. Leland's just being oversensitive, as usual. He'll cool down and be back home by morning," I said, trying to convince myself as much as them. But the knot of pure dread in my stomach suggested otherwise. "I don't think so, Alara," Phoebe said quietly, her voice full of a pity I didn't want. "Not this time." They left shortly after, leaving me alone in the garishly decorated room, with a full, untouched cake and an empty chair where my husband should have been. I drove home in a daze, fuming, my mind a whirlwind of rehearsed arguments, of all the ways Leland had overreacted and deliberately ruined the beautiful night I'd worked so hard to plan for him. But Leland wasn't home. The house was dark and unnervingly silent. The first real sign was in the closet. His side, always meticulously organized, was conspicuously emptier. His suits were gone, as were his casual clothes. In the bathroom, the counter was clear of his toiletries, his toothbrush missing from the holder. I ran from room to room, a frantic energy seizing me, noticing the small voids he'd left behind, the architecture book gone from the nightstand, his favorite coffee mug absent from the dish rack. He was gone. I called him repeatedly, each call going straight to a cold, impersonal voicemail. With each unanswered ring, my anger began to curdle into something unfamiliar and terrifying. Panic. "This is ridiculous," I texted him, my thumbs shaking. "You're seriously leaving over a joke? After everything I did for your birthday?" No response. "You're proving my point about being dramatic. Call me." Nothing. By morning, I'd left 17 voicemails and 32 texts, ranging from furious and demanding to pleading and pathetic. 3 days of this deafening, agonizing silence later, I got an email. Not a text, not a call. An email, like I was some business acquaintance he was severing ties with. "Lara, I've moved out. I've been planning this for weeks as I realized our relationship has become irreparably toxic. I have documented the pattern of emotional manipulation, public humiliation, and gaslighting I've experienced. I have consulted a lawyer who advised me to inform you that I will be filing for divorce. My father will collect the rest of my belongings on Thursday. Please don't be there when he comes. Leland." I read it 4 times, then a 5th, convinced it was another joke, a sick, twisted taste of my own medicine. My hands shaking, I called Phoebe, my voice already choked with tears, needing sympathy. "Did you know about this?" I demanded the moment she answered. Her hesitation was a confession. "He mentioned he was unhappy, Lara." "Unhappy? He's leaving me over a stupid, harmless joke." "Oh, Alara," she said carefully, and her tone was different now, distant and clinical, as if she were talking to a stranger. "He's been recording your conversations for months. He played me one where you threatened to tell his boss he was having an affair if he didn't come home from that work conference early." I stopped breathing. I remembered that. The words had tumbled out in a fit of pique. "That was just to get him to come home. I didn't mean it." "It doesn't matter if you meant it. You said it. He said you go through his phone but explode if he touches yours. That you isolate him from his family. That you constantly compare him to other men. So now you're on his side completely?" My voice rose with disbelief. "Some best friend you are. I tried to warn you, Alara. That day at the boutique when you told me your hilarious birthday plan, I explicitly told you it was a terrible, cruel idea and that you should stop before you destroyed everything. You laughed at me." I hung up on her. It's been 3 months. 3 months of rattling around alone in the house we bought together, its silence a constant accusation. The divorce papers arrived yesterday. Not through a lawyer's courier, but delivered by hand. By Phoebe. She stood in my doorway, cloaked in an aura of fake sympathy, handing me the thick manila envelope that held the formal end of my marriage. "He didn't want to pay for a process server," she explained awkwardly. "He thought this would be less embarrassing for you." Less embarrassing? As if anything could be more humiliating than having my so-called best friend deliver divorce papers from my husband. The husband who, I discovered, had completely emptied our joint savings account the day after the party, leaving me scrambling to cover the mortgage alone on my part-time boutique salary. "There's something else you should know," Phoebe said, refusing to meet my eyes. "Leland and we've been spending time together. Not romantically," she added quickly, seeing the murderous look on my face. "At first, I was just helping him find an apartment and connect with a therapist, but he's a good person, Alara. He needed a friend." "Get out," I whispered, the words like acid in my throat. Then louder, a raw scream, "Get out!" She left, but not before her final words twisted the knife. "He's doing well, Alara. He seems lighter somehow. Happy." The divorce filing paints me as an emotionally abusive monster. It lists all these incidents of what his lawyer calls gaslighting and manipulation. He even included typed transcripts of conversations he secretly recorded. Who does that? Who turns a marriage into a legal deposition? The cake sat in our refrigerator for 2 weeks after the party. I couldn't bring myself to throw it out. It was the only thing that stayed when everything else fell apart. When a fine layer of green mold finally started to bloom on its surface, I sat on the cold kitchen floor and ate one last, stale piece before dumping the rest in the trash, crying over chocolate frosting and shattered pride like some pathetic rom-com character. Sometimes, late at night, I scroll through photos of us, trying to pinpoint the exact moment things changed. There's one from last Christmas where he's looking at me instead of the camera, and I never noticed before how utterly tired his eyes looked, how forced and fragile his smile was. Was he already planning his escape then? Had I really been that awful? I refuse to accept full blame here. A relationship takes two people. He could have tried harder to understand my sense of humor. He could have been less sensitive, less serious. He could have talked to me, really talked to me, instead of sneaking around, recording our private conversations and consulting lawyers behind my back. That's the real betrayal, not my harmless prank. He built a case against me instead of a bridge to me. Yesterday, feeling reckless and lonely, I texted Julian. He responded right away, suggesting we meet for drinks. As I got ready, putting on lipstick in the bathroom mirror where Leland's things used to be, I thought about what Phoebe said, about Leland seeming lighter. Maybe that's what I need too. To move on. To feel lighter. The divorce papers sit unsigned on the coffee table, next to the sad, grease-stained remnants of the cake box I still can't bring myself to throw away. Tomorrow, I'll sign them, I tell myself. Tomorrow, I'll accept that my marriage ended because of a joke gone wrong. But tonight, I'm meeting Julian. After all, I'm single now, right? Leland made sure of that when he walked out and left nothing but cake and wreckage behind.